And we also have to be clear about the fact that WikiLeaks has been accused of intervening in other countries' affairs. The president of Ecuador said that Julian Assange released unauthorized information from the Vatican. He's accused Assange of intervening in Ecuador's affairs. So we could see more charges coming based upon the fact that WikiLeaks is a non-state hostile intelligence service.
Well, and to the point of, and that is what Mike Pompeo has called, has called him early on. Let's see if he repeats that line. Oh, hold on one second, Steve. I'm being told in the air that the Assange attorneys are speaking outside the court right now. Let's go listen to that.
Warned that Julian Assange would face prosecution and extradition to the United States for his publishing activities with WikiLeaks. Unfortunately, today we've been proven right. Mr. Assange was arrested this morning at about 10 o'clock at the Ecuadorian embassy after the ambassador formally notified him that his asylum would be revoked, and he was arrested by British police. We've today received a warrant and a provisional extradition request from the United States, alleging that he has conspired with Chelsea Manning in relation to the materials that were published by WikiLeaks in 2010. This sets a dangerous precedent for all media organisations and journalists in Europe and elsewhere around the world. This precedent means that any journalist can be extradited for prosecution in the United States for having published truthful information about the United States. I've just been with Mr. Assange in the police cells. He wants to thank all of his supporters for their ongoing support, and he said, "I told you so."
Well, the only thing to add to this is the fact that this is a dark day for journalism. As Jennifer said, this sets a precedent. We don't want this to go forward. This has to be averted. The UK government needs to make a full assurance that a journalist will never be extradited to the United States for publishing activity. This pertains to publishing work 9 years ago. Publishing of documents, of videos of the killing of innocent civilians, exposure of war crimes. This is journalism. It's called conspiracy. It's conspiracy to commit journalism. So this has to end, and we urge everybody to support Julian Assange in fighting this extradition. Thank you.
What legal avenues are available to you to prevent his extradition?
We will be contesting and fighting extradition. We've requested that he now gets medical treatment. He's been refused medical treatment for the past 7.5 years, 7 years since being inside the embassy. We will be fighting extradition, and he'll be brought before the court again within the next month.
How is he now?
How is now? What are the We're not going to be taking any more questions today. Thank you very much.
What are his health problems?
You were asking about the elements in the extradition request. It is quite obvious that the U.S. authorities have picked just one element of what they have been working on for a long time, including the Espionage Act, acts that have decades in prison. There is no assurance that there would not be additional charges when he is on U.S. soil, and I think and I believe that this was an angle in the approach to increase the likelihood of him being extradited.
So
that
it's
is
a
obvious.
tricky accusation for you?
Do you have anything to say about the Ecuadorian embassy
tricky accusation for you
this morning?
That's very interesting and important there, the perspective and the position that the attorneys for Julian Assange are taking. Steve, this gets to directly something that you have written and talked a lot about, because there has been some discussion leading up to today of if Julian Assange was ever charged with, let's say, espionage, it would raise some thorny issues as it related to the First Amendment. That is clearly the position that his attorneys are trying to make, saying that this is a First Amendment issue and he published truthful information. But the fact that he is charged with helping crack into a classified U.S. government computer, do you think this takes it to a different place now?
I think it does, Kate, and I think that's exactly why both this took so long and why the count that was unveiled this morning in the indictment has nothing to do, at least overtly, with publishing this information. I think the government all along has understood that it would set a very dangerous precedent to prosecute anyone, even Julian Assange, merely for the act of publishing classified national security information, because what would separate Assange from, say, the New York Times? By focusing on Assange's role in directly assisting Manning in stealing these documents, in providing these materials to Assange. What the government, I think, is saying is that's not journalism. That's a crime. You know, I think there are still going to be folks who are going to be worried about that, Kate. But to me, the question going forward is that the only charge? Or is the government, in fact, going to try to bring additional charges later? You heard Assange's lawyer talk about potential diplomatic assurances. Those may be necessary if the British government's going to be able to convince a British court to accept the U.S.'s extradition request.
And Sam, because this is his attorneys and his U.S. attorney actually put out a statement even before this, making the same case that we just heard from his attorneys there, but saying that this boils down to what Assange did. The facts of it are, it boils down to encouraging a source to provide him information and taking efforts to protect the identity of the source. It's very clear what the case that they're trying to make here.
They are, but that's exactly not what the Department of Justice indictment says. This is not a First Amendment issue, at least in this current indictment. It relates to conspiracy to illegally hack into a U.S. government system. And I want to be very clear on another point. Julian Assange and WikiLeaks of 2010 look very different than Julian Assange and WikiLeaks in 2016 and in 2019. We don't know whether there will be superseding indictments related to other charges related to election interference in 2016. The Department of Justice, Shimon, you've covered this extensively, has indicated that Organization One, WikiLeaks, worked with the GRU to release documents from the DNC and John Podesta. We don't know if there will be a charge related to that. And we also have to be clear about the fact that WikiLeaks has been accused of intervening in other countries' affairs. The president of Ecuador said that Julian Assange released unauthorized information from the Vatican. He's accused Assange of intervening in Ecuador's affairs. So we could see more charges coming based upon the fact that WikiLeaks is a non-state hostile intelligence service.
Well, and to the point of, and that is what Mike Pompeo has called, has called him early on. Let's see if he repeats that line. Organization One is how WikiLeaks was referred to in some of the indictments related to the Russians who have been indicted in the Russia investigation. This indictment was signed on March 6th of last year, in 2018. How does that fit in, Shimon, in the Russian? Does it at all?
I mean, right now we don't have any indication that it does relate to that, and obviously Julian Assange, WikiLeaks was an important part of the Russia investigation. Certainly came up during the Mueller FBI's investigation into Russia collusion. Where all this goes, it's not really clear. I don't think that there will be any charges right now. We don't see any evidence that there's going to be any charges related to the Russia.
The FBI has been going after him for a long time.
That's the thing that I think people don't realize. Julian Assange has been a thorn at the side of the FBI for years. We're talking about, they have been wanting to arrest him for years. I know there were agents here in New York years ago for a different case were trying to arrest him. And obviously there was this dispute within the Department of Justice whether or not you can bring charges against Julian Assange. There's a very different look of Julian Assange. I think Sam made that point with this administration and under the Obama administration. But the view of WikiLeaks and Julian Assange started to change at the end of the Obama administration as the FBI started gathering more information on it.
It's also complicated. Chelsea Manning's sentence was commuted by President Obama.
It was, after Chelsea Manning put American diplomats, American personnel at risk, and I think that may be an issue. We know that President Trump likes to throw it all the way back to President Obama whenever he's under the spotlight, and let's be clear, President Trump has been a fan of WikiLeaks. Right. He said he loves WikiLeaks, but the Department of Justice and the State Department did all this work to get him extradited.
You know, you have to think about the role that Julian Assange played in the 2016 election. You can't forget about that, and what this and why the federal government, why the FBI wanted to go after him even more. Yeah. It is an important part of this. Where any of this goes in terms of the Russia stuff, we don't yet know.
Yeah,
but
well,
it is an important part of this.
And one first step, Steve, really quickly, is do you think extradition is assured? Do you think there's a question?
I think there is a question, Kate, only in the sense that extradition really is 90% political and 10% legal. I think the more that the U.S. is able to sell the British government, sell British courts on the idea that this indictment today is the heart of the matter, I think the more of a slam dunk it'll be for extradition, the more headway Assange's lawyers can make in saying, no, 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 as soon as Assange arrives on U.S. soil, they're going to slap him with a whole bunch of Espionage Act indictments arising out of conduct that looks a lot more like journalism. You know, I think that's the scenario where a British court might pause a beat before signing on to this extradition request.
Wow, this is really important stuff and fascinating. I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for being here. All right, so coming up for us...